Great news! There's a quick way you can save money. Switch to Geico. Geico could help you get great coverage at a great price. And it only takes 15 minutes to see if you could save 15% or more on car insurance. Go to geico.com today and see how much you could save.
Repose in the soul of Wesley Johnson. Things that would have been less disrespectful if they just called the game right there. If Harden would have just started singing Cardi B.
Cardi.
If Harden would have put the ball on the ground, walked off, and eaten avocado toast. Also, how many steps are we giving in the NBA these days?
2, 3, 4, 5.
All of them. Let's go around the horn.
True story. First time I saw that Harden play was just now. I haven't seen it all day.
Oh, you got jokes?
It's Around the Horn, the show of competitive banter. Here's Tony Reali.
I have never knowingly violated NCAA rules while serving as head coach of this great program. I have never paid a recruiter, prospect, or their family or representative to come to Arizona. The only attempted corrections by the original source of the media statements are still inaccurate and completely false.
Sean Miller will be back on the sidelines tonight for Arizona. Those were his first public comments since the ESPN report. The conversations he had discussing payments with Christian Dawkins were intercepted by FBI wiretaps. That Mark Schlabach report posted by ESPN on Friday was corrected twice by this network in regards to timeline over the weekend. ESPN says they stand by the reporting of the piece. National panel, I want to ask how you feel about the reporting here, but first about how Sean Miller sounded to you. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked on Monday. What position is Sean Miller in? What position is Arizona in? Ramona, start us off.
Yeah, I don't think this is over. I know he came out there wearing an Arizona shirt. He's obviously got the backing of the school and the Board of Regents. They had a meeting right before this. But this is an ongoing investigation. Obviously, the feds are still looking into this. And, you know, the ramifications of this are still unfolding. They've already lost a couple of recruits. Shaq's son, Sharif O'Neal, decommitted last week in light of all of this. And I think you look at this now and say, okay, he had his say. He vigorously defended himself, but he also carefully chose his words, saying, I never knowingly did this. And it felt like that statement had been approved by all the lawyers so that he wasn't saying something false in the statement.
Bill Plaschke?
Very precarious position. They're going to go headlong into this NCAA tournament, try to challenge the NCAA to maybe come after him. But I don't know about this. And Miller actually, he said that he admitted that he had a conversation about paying a player. He said that. He admitted that. The same program fired a coach in January who was involved in this FBI probe. The same program, again, seems very tenuous. Arizona seems to know what they're doing. I think we have not heard the end of this at all.
Glenn Yates.
Yeah, I mean, Book Richardson was that coach, and some reports had him facing potentially up to 60 years in prison because of his role in this. He looked concerned, Sean Miller did, in my opinion, which was that he knows something at least went awry. And I'm not saying that means that I'm passing judgment on what should and should not be done regarding paying players and so on and so forth. But when you see a guy read a statement like that with that level of pause on his face, there's the legal matter and then there's the personal matter. I didn't see a guy who looked like he felt vindicated in his own heart, just one guy who felt he needed to say something in order to make a public appearance that he was going to continue to do his job.
Frank Isola.
Yeah, it was his biggest TV appearance since he appeared on The Tonight Show dribbling the basketball. He had to deliver here. And as Ramona pointed out, he's showing up with the Arizona shirt on. He's got the banner behind him. So he has the full support of the school. And he's reading a statement. He's not taking questions. And he's addressing that one specific thing that had been reported about talking about a $100,000 payment. And then he said, hey, guess what? There was a time when I did have a conversation about a payment. There's still a federal probe going on. As like everyone else mentioned, he's already lost an assistant coach. So this is a long way from being over.
So you guys don't think he looked defiant in here? And like you said, he has the support of Arizona. He's going to coach tonight. Frank, you can address that.
No, I think that he believes that he's going to be exonerated because I think he feels like all the focus now is on this $100,000 payment. And he's trying to tell you, like Bill mentioned, yeah, I once had a conversation. Somebody called me up about paying a player. We said absolutely not, and we've never done that before, and the player did not come to Arizona.
Doesn't that clear him then in your mind in any way, Plaschke?
No, it doesn't clear him at all because, again, we don't know exactly what they talked about. And, again, it's hard to imagine any program where the assistant coach is so involved who's already been part of the program and been fired. He seemed almost as tentative as he did defiant. He seemed to me like he wasn't really sure. He was like bowling forward into this madness.
You know what wasn't tentative? Discussions after this report came out. And that's what he's talking. He's talking about this network. He's talking about shows. This show, we addressed it. The exact question I asked was, what position is Sean Miller in right now? All right? And some of the things that were said there, Jackie McMullen talked to some people she talked to this weekend, her sources, saying he was toast. I think we've all heard Jay Billis talking about how he would never coach again. And then you hear about the recruits who are now backing away from the school. That's because they heard a lot of what people were talking about. Has this been fair is the question I want to ask Ramona Shelburne.
Well, in the sense that there have already been real world consequences for it, in that they lost some commitments. He obviously had his name dragged through the mud after this, and the reaction to some of the reporting. But let's go back to the original report. The report did not say that he paid for the player to come to Arizona; just said he had a conversation, and that's what Sean Miller just admitted to in that press conference. So I don't know. We may have got the timeline wrong. It seemed like initially it said 2017, and then it was 16. The year's been off, but the initial report and what Mark Sabaugh said is that he had a conversation. He just confirmed that.
Glenn Yates.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, look, this is Arizona basketball. You've got to take the heat when it comes to these sort of reputational issues, and that's why overall I think the underlying feeling of what you saw from Sean Miller was one of embarrassment. His reputation is different now than it was 2 weeks ago, and he knows that.
He'll be on the sidelines tonight versus Stanford. We're going to move on. An NCAA tournament's going to be with Sean Miller, it looks like. It might be without players. Let's listen to Jay Williams.
Wouldn't it be a crazy thing if we saw players actually just not boycott a game in the NCAA tournament, but boycott the Final Four? Imagine how quickly the NCAA will recognize that it's just not only a business for themselves, but also a business for the athletes.
How do you hear something like that, Clinton?
I hear a guy who, although I agree with him fundamentally, doesn't seem to understand how employment versus athletic situations work. You can't just equate NBA contracts to NCAA scholarships. Number one, those are year to year. They can get cut at any time. And number two, the money is not in hand. Therefore, the inherent process of protesting doesn't make sense because what you're giving up is something that you can never get back. It is not a renewable source like the cash that comes with revenue dollars from the NBA. I agree with him in theory, but Jay, come on. They don't have any cash. That's why they can't protest.
Right, guy Sola.
Yeah, and Jay was a brilliant college player, and he played at one of the most high-profile programs at Duke. I don't remember him boycotting anything. He was playing at NCAA tournaments and in Final Fours. Can you imagine a team like Gonzaga that for all these years always got knocked out? They finally made the Final Four, and you have players on the team that said, no, let's boycott now. For a lot of the players, in fact, probably 95% of these players, that's going to be the basketball highlight of their career, going to a Final Four. I don't think they would ever do something like that.
Ramona Shelburne.
No, I mean, he's sort of professionalizing these players. I mean, you can say that if you're getting paid, if you're part of a program, the equivalent is, we've seen this in women's sports where they haven't been being paid equally and they all decided to sit out. But this wasn't, they're actually paid. Like the national teams are actually paid. They may not be paid as much as they should be, but they're paid. The college players right now are amateurs, and you can't treat them like professionals in this sense and ask them to sit out.
Bill Plaschke.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree more with this. Again, like Frank said, most of the players aren't going to be going pro. They call it one shining moment for a reason. There's not two shining moments. These guys got one chance. A lot of these players have one chance at this the highlight of their life. And to boycott this for the very 2 or 3% that are going to go on and make money, no. I mean, a lot of these players don't deserve to be paid anyway. So no, it's absurd. They got to play. It's March Madness. We'll get them one shining moment.
On the odds makers, 0 to 100% chance that any player makes any type of stand